Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 30th, 2020, and the time now is 1 p.m. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 16. Second notice was Friday, June 26. The committee will hear and accept testimony on Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 Appropriation Act as requested by the governor relative to Department of Parks and Rec fiscal year 2021 budget request. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me today, and I have Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, Senator Regine Besco-Lee, and I have the Oversight Chair of Parks and Rec, Senator Kelly Marsh-Titano. The budget hearing shall be as follows. This is the general rules. Those testifying on behalf of the department will be recognized by the chair, and this myself, and we have Mr. Jesse Garcia as the acting director. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. We are discussing their 2021 budget. We may dip into 2020, but we should try to focus only on 2021. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you are done, you'll be asked to remain in the room for questions or additional testimony as may be desired by the members of the committee. Proper form decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted, removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You would state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel from the Department of Parks and Recreation to rise and for our sergeant arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I would ask now Mr. Jesse Garcia, the Acting Director of Parks and Rec, to please present the budget for 2021, sir.
My name is Jesse Garcia, Acting Director of Department of Parks and Recreation. The budget that was submitted from the government.
If you choose, you can bring your mask down.
The budget that was submitted by the governor's office is we can keep it a status quo.
So you don't. Do you have any other statement you'd like to present in reference to the budget?
Well, as far as what was submitted, we will abide by it, and apparently I will be acting until they find a permanent director for this position.
All right. Thank you, sir. Based on the report provided by the governor regarding coronavirus relief funds, DPR was approved funding of $250 for the Safe Haven project. Do you know the status of that project, sir?
So there was money appropriated, and that went to the upgrades of the stadium for the Safe Haven.
Okay. Do you know where it's at right now so far, or?
We're still working on it with the administration as far as the Safe Haven is concerned.
Okay. Does your department have any outstanding retro employee salary payment as a result of the Competitive Wage Act of 2014? Do you have any employees that are due any retro pay due to the Competitive Wage Act or any personnel actions that are due to them?
I think there's a few, but they're being worked on right now, and I don't have the numbers with me.
All right, so it's ongoing right now. Okay. As you are aware, the TAF Tourist Attraction Fund is not performing at the levels appropriated in FY 2021. Depending on the recovery period, the TAF funding will likely receive less funding. How will DPR prepare for such shortfall, and has the department been keen on looking for federal funding to assist in its operation?
So as far as what the shortfalls with DPR right now, as we speak, I'm assisting the department in getting the parks up and ready with the cleanups and stuff. Well, that's ongoing.
So it'd be safe to say then, Mr. Garcia, that because you're the acting director and also the deputy director for DPW, DPW's been working hand in hand with the parks then to make sure that they maintain their whatever they need to do, correct?
Yes, not only DPR, I'm supporting all the other agencies as they request as far as the COVID response.
All right. What is the status of the Territorial Park Patrol Reserve Program? Are you aware of anything? In FY 2021, you have a status quo request for 10 reservists. However, no funding has been spent to date. Do you know if they're going to start getting that program going?
So there was talk about the reserve program, but as far as the parks rangers, we have only 2 full-time employees at that position as of this time.
All right. There's a new contract amount of $120,000 for pool operation and maintenance contract. Could you please go into detail of the contract on the pool operation? So that we don't repeat what happened last year?
Yeah, so as far as the pool operation, the Gander pool is being evaluated, and right before the COVID happened, we were getting an assessment done. The assessment report should be out shortly. And then the repairs and for the northern swimming pool are undergoing as we speak through an assessment.
All right. You are aware of, I think it was a few years back, there's almost $6 million that was appropriated by the Department of Interior to repair, build, and so forth for the parks. Are you aware of any of those if any of those contracts were ever initiated, or what's going on with those fundings before it's lost?
No, I'm getting up to speed with what exactly they have on contract.
Okay. I'd like to also recognize Senator Jim Mullins joined us this afternoon. I'd ask the speaker to ask a question, but I'll ask first the oversight chair if she has any questions. Senator Kelly Marsh, you have any questions, and you'll be followed by the speaker.
Suduas Maasi, Mr. Chair. And just to provide a little bit of information, because I do appreciate Mr. Garcia serving as our acting director to stabilize the department while the search for a permanent director is ongoing. And I realize he's just been in position, I believe, a week or so now. He'll be providing more information, but I believe with the question you were asking about the Competitive Wage Act, that there's about $70,000 that DPR will need to be paying out. And I do want to applaud DPR in their ability over the last several years in getting significant amounts of federal funding. So as I mentioned, I wanted to start off by recognizing that Mr. Garcia is an acting director detailed there from DPW. And I thank him for his commitment to stabilizing the department, and I will press for a more permanent appointee at the soonest. This department needs that stability. So he's only been in place for a little bit more than a week, and so I understand that some of the questions may have to be deferred to providing the answer at a later date. I do want to point out that I was greatly disappointed when I heard earlier this year that DPR's budget, despite its needs, had stayed largely the same. While we need agencies to live within their means, their budget also needs to set them up for success. The first thing that I have asked DPR directors to do is to analyze the needs of the agency and ask for the funds to support those needs. I've spent numerous hours in meetings the last few months to ensure that this was the case. Unfortunately, with the resignation and the reassignment of directors, I've had to postpone or cancel oversight hearings, but we do have one in the works again. My questions will ask you to outline some of the structural, personal, personnel and equipment needs for DPR's success, and discuss how they are present in the current budget proposal, or if after 3 directors and our COVID-19 issues that the budget perhaps needs to be updated to better reflect its real needs. So in fiscal year 2019, DPR was funded $3,413,433, and in FY 2020 was appropriated over $4 million, with an increase of just under $700,000. For the fiscal year 21, which we are looking at today, DPR's budget request is an increase of $185,310. So what we'll be looking at is getting some detail on that funding increase. This fiscal year, 3 positions were transferred out of DPR. DPR's chief planner, the former acting parks administrator, and a heavy equipment mechanic were transferred to DPW and the Guam Mass Transit Authority. The law specifies that the funding of a transferred employee must accompany the position. The heavy equipment mechanic transferred to DPW remains in the budget. So if you do know, Mr. Garcia, and again, I know that you've only been there a week, so I understand that your information is going to be as much as you've been able to gain at this time. Do you know if that transfer of the heavy equipment mechanic has been permanent or if it's a temporary transfer?
I believe it is going to be a permanent transfer. As you know that DPW does handle heavy equipment. Parks and Recreation doesn't have any heavy equipment to maintain. So it would be just that position be justified for that transfer.
Right, and as you mentioned, DPR doesn't really have heavy equipment, but certainly DPW does. So alternatively, would it be best to use the vacated position for a planner or a program coordinator? Because what I don't want to see is that too many are transferred out of DPR, which already has staffing needs. So have you been able to look at the staffing needs and see the need for some of these middle management positions, like making sure that there is a planner at DPR or a program coordinator?
Yes, so like the planner's position, we have an engineer over at DPR which can manage the planning for DPR.
Okay, so I believe you mentioned an engineer. A planner or a program coordinator could greatly assist DPR towards updating its state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, the park rules, vendor rules, adopt a park rules, and its fee schedule. Such positions are key in managing DPR's resources, programs, and assets. It is also important for DPR to run after funding opportunities and grants that are available. It's been good to see that some of that's been done with the Department of Interior grants, and we need for all of our agencies to continue to do work like that, including for our park and recreational projects and programs. Is it DPR's plan to hire any planners or program coordinators this coming year?
Right now, that we're still reviewing that, but as far as the planning and stuff, as myself running the Public Works and DPR, I split my resources to make sure that we get the proper operations going.
Sorry, I think we're both a little bit muffled. I know that I come out muffled sometimes, but I think you're saying that you're there to provide that stability and that...
and support.
And support, and that we all need to continue looking at that structure to make sure that the needs are being met. So For FY 2021, there were 9 positions for the maintenance of all the parks, with at least one currently vacant. Is that understanding correct? Is there only one vacancy? So I believe that there are 9 positions for maintenance of the parks and 1 vacant. Can you update me on those numbers?
I believe there is only one vacancy available, but there were some contracts that were issued out for the maintenance of parks, mainly down south. The parks in the south were being maintained by a contract through GVB. And then the northern parts were handled by the DPR staff.
And are all of those contracts down south, are they fully functioning? Are any of them coming up for needing to be recontracted, or do you know how long those will be in place?
It should be in place until at least September 30.
Okay, until the end of the fiscal year.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, and looking at the budget allocates just over $1 million to contractually for those park maintenance contracts that we just talked about, for repairs and renovations as well. And an additional $500,000 from the Tourist Attraction Fund for a total of $1.5 million, although with the Tourist Attraction Fund, we're going to just have to see how that does. How would DPR fare should half those earmarked contractual costs be used instead for salaries of laborers and groundspeople? So I think one thing that needs to be looked at going forward is what's going to be most economical and effective for the program. To continue to look at whether the contracts are the direction to go, and if we have that Tourist Attraction Fund money, and or whether we need to be building up the maintenance crew.
Yes, so with what we have, Senator, I guess we'll make it work with what we have at this time.
And I mean, I know that there are challenges. This is why I wrote a bill and have been challenging actually authorizing the Island Beautification Task Force to be coming up with the long-term solutions, because the Department of Parks and Rec, it's a lot to deal with, and what they need what the entire island needs are long-term solutions. We're seeing a lot of destruction happening at the parks and so forth. The director before you was telling me that almost every other day, they are replacing a shower head, a faucet, or something like this. So those long-term approaches definitely need to be getting into place. So in the past fiscal years, DPR has been known and challenged in paying its water and power bill. A year ago, for example, it was faced with over $500,000 owed for its water usage, not including the electrical usage to support its facilities. This fiscal year appropriates $143,694 for water and $240,065 for power. To the best of your ability at this point, does that combined $384,000 and, $384,029, does that seem sufficient for what you know of DPR's water and power usage for this upcoming year?
So what I did was, with the water bill, when I first became the acting director a few months ago, I had my guys go out and identify water leaks, and we have repaired quite a few, so I'm pretty sure the water bill has gone down.
That part is good. We definitely need to make sure that what is being asked for will indeed take care of the needs, and that the agency is doing everything it can to make sure that any leaks or non-appropriate use are being maintained and minimized. There are only 3 vacant positions that are funded in the fiscal year 2021 budget. There's a vacancy for a lifeguard, a planner, and someone to carry out maintenance. Do you know potentially the number of DPR employees that may retire this fiscal year? So I want us to get a look at that staffing pattern. Is there anybody up for retirement this year?
There's probably going to be maybe 2 at the most.
What positions are those 2 in, if you don't mind?
So we have one that is retiring in, this Friday. Miss Linda Elgin will be retiring out of DPR, and probably 1 potential other.
Okay, so 1 this Friday, and sorry if I missed the positions. What are the positions that are going to be vacated?
The SHPO position that Ms. Elgin is holding would be vacant.
Okay, so the SHPO and I think there was 1 other. What was the other?
There's 1 other, but it's still contemplating a retirement.
Okay. So with this movement of the chief planner position, I worry about it being defunded if this becomes a permanent transfer to the Department of Parks and, Public Works. So I think that's something to definitely keep an eye on, because it just seems that DPR is missing its tier of middle management right now. And so, I highly encourage, I want you to have the appropriate staff for your
Yes.
success. So, yeah, if you could speak to that a little bit.
So like what I was saying, I don't want to put the staffing of what I want. It would come from the permanent director when he's selected, or when they're selected.
Now, looking at the Public Recreation Services Fund for fiscal year 2019, it brought in as revenues $119,847, and certainly there are indications that it's going to be tracking less for this fiscal year. The special fund tracking report submitted by BBMR, however, while it spells out the underperformance, when we look at the 2021 budget, it looks to that fund for $225,000. So if it was not performing that well a couple of years ago, it's underperforming this year, and we've had our shutdowns. How will DPR adjust to the decreased government revenues of the uncertainty with funds like that? Have you had any ability to really look at that? I mean, I know you're there to stabilize, but I think we're all quite concerned that even its own services fund is underperforming.
Yes, underperforming. So as being there with Department of Public Works, together with Parks and Recs, I would help them balance their operations.
Okay, and the more that our agencies are working together, I think that's going to be something very important and a way to serve the needs of the community, which of course is paramount here. So in looking at the budget for equipment, in this last year there was over $12,000 for bush cutters, mowers, blowers, and chainsaws. In the upcoming, this current 2021 budget request, it's only asking for $3,540. And in order to increase 2 pieces of equipment per item, to the best of your understanding at this point, is $3,540 going to be enough to build up your
So-
equipment, or?
With the amount of staff that they have, it should be sufficient.
Okay, so for a projected 9 maintenance crew, it should be enough. Very good. And how many certified procurement specialists does DPR employ?
I believe there's only one person that does the procurement for DPR.
And I would hope that that's not the person who's going to retire. So having somebody who's a certified procurement specialist is very important, and we hope that they will continue to stay there. As was mentioned, the Dededo and Hagåtña pools are both closed. It was good to hear that there is ongoing repair to the Dededo pool, and that there is the assessment for the Hagåtña pool. Is there a timeline when the Dededo pool might open?
So the assessment is ongoing now. There's quite a few things that has to be done to the pool to get it back operational. As you know, there was issues with public health opening up the pool. So all of those things are being worked on as we speak. How do we get it back running?
Okay, and so do we have any rough estimate that we can just be keeping in mind? Are we looking at a month or 2, or maybe even longer, just so that we can get it in our minds and just manage our expectations? Do you have any rough estimates?
Probably within 4 to 6 months, we should be able to get it back and running.
Did you say, just so that I'm clear, I want to make sure I heard you correctly, is that 4 to 6 months?
Yes,
Okay, and that's for both Dededo and Hagåtña? Or that's Dededo?
just for Dededo.
Okay, and then Hagåtña is still being assessed, so there's perhaps no timeline there. Is there any timeline for Hagåtña yet, or that's part of the assessment?
That's the assessment. We're going to determine if it is feasible to retrofit it to work, or we're waiting for the assessment.
Okay, and so I just want to point out that there is a separate appropriation of $500,000 this fiscal year and for next for the upkeep and repair of the pool. So please look at that and ensure that it's sufficient so that as we're moving along in this, we can do our best to make sure that we are looking at numbers that will truly address the needs. As I mentioned before, I will be calling an informational hearing in the next couple of weeks so that we can understand where we are at with the parks and pools and DPR's staffing pattern. Much of the appropriation earmarked for repairs and renovation for the park restrooms and facilities, as was mentioned by the chair, it was a $5.6 million grant. I believe we're still in phase 1, and I believe there are still 2 more phases to go, so that would also be a good time to be able to talk about those phases.
Yes.
Yes, and just to talk about the lifeguards a little bit, there have been quite a few riptide and swimming incidents that have occurred lately. There are a total of 7 lifeguards, those filled lifeguard positions for particular public beaches, and 1 vacant lifeguard position. So is it in the works to hire that 1 missing lifeguard? And is 7 still enough for the upcoming needs for next year?
We would like to hire the additional lifeguard, but with the 7 that we have, we can live with that for now.
Okay, so I believe you're saying the number that you have right now seems to be working. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And to look a little bit at the Recreation Division, so the Recreation Division used to operate a youth center in every village, but there are 5 recreation leaders at this time. Who do these recreation leaders report to? Is there still a recreation administrator to oversee them? What is the case and what are the plans?
There is an opening for the recreation administrator, which I believe is in the process of being recruited.
Good, because these kind of positions are very important to the success of DPR, and we want to make sure that those positions are not being lost or defunded and that they are indeed moving forward. So there was a little bit mentioned about the park officers that patrol. My understanding is that during this emergency, they are under the Guam Police Department. Are they still reporting to the Guam Police Department, or are they reporting to you? If you could explain that a little bit for us.
So during the COVID, during this COVID operation, they still report to the Guam Police Department for to assist, because we don't have enough park rangers. So we utilize, or we assign them to the Guam Police Department to assist with patrolling all our parks.
So it sounds like it's a cooperative effort where they are helping augment some of the patrol needs of the parks then.
Yes, because
Very good. And we look forward to, there is $50,000 earmarked for patrol reserve program. And so perhaps at the informational briefing is where we can outline some of the thoughts about how that will move forward, because as we've seen for the police officers, reservists, this is something that can be very successful, and we want to make sure that we have as much of that ability as possible. So the last thing that I'll talk about now is the cemetery. So contractually, $25,000 is earmarked for the cemetery. My understanding is, at the same time, there has been a waiver of cemetery fees through this pandemic, this state of emergency. So with your understanding at this point, will the $25,000 still be enough to see all the functions through for FY21, or do you think some of the waiving of the fees this year is going to be something we need to look at for next year's budget?
that should be sufficient, because
Okay, and that's good. So, Seduas Masi, Mr. Chair, those are my questions for now. I asked that perhaps I could do a follow-up question after the others have spoken, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seduas, sorry.
All right.
Dispense Seduas Masi to Mr. Garcia for stepping in and providing that stabilization to the department.
All right, thank you, Senator Kelly. Before I ask the speaker for questions, I'd like to also recognize that joined us, Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Talina Nelson, and Senator Therese Terlais also joined us. If I'm correct, I think I did recognize the other senators. So I'll just state it again, Senator Regine Bescoli and Senator Jim Wynne. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, I do. Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity, and Jesse, thank you, Mr. Garcia, for stepping up to the plate to be in the acting capacity. I did have about 4 questions, and as I look at the budget that comes to mind, I'm looking at what funds the Department of Parks and Recs, and we're looking at from the Tourist Attraction Fund at over, should have been at least 1.8 million, and then the Public Recreation Services Fund, which should have been at 500,000, and then the Limited Gaming Fund, which probably should have been at 116,000. And as I look at what we're going through with this pandemic, I know that this agency that literally has some very critical mandates are probably going to be in a critical position moving forward. And one that comes to mind, Mr. Garcia, is that as it relates to the Guam Historic Preservation Officer and then the State Historic Preservation Officer. And so maybe one of the things I want to ask, and if you can't answer it, I know that there's an informational hearing that's coming up with the good oversight chair, and as her vice chair, these were some of the concerns that I had. The position of the Guam Historic Preservation Officer and the SHPO have now been bifurcated, and maybe the first question to ask is can you tell us what the roles are between the both of them now? Because I think there's two different names at it, and I just finding out now that one of those positions will be retiring this Friday. So, do you know what the differences of the roles are from both of them?
So one position is the SHPO, which deals with the military buildup, and then the other one is for the local.
Okay, so I think the SHPO is a federally funded position, am I right?
Yes, I believe so.
And will the funding for that position be provided through federal funds?
I believe it is.
Okay, you believe. And then I want to note that the United States Navy recently published a supplemental Mariana Islands training and testing supplemental environmental impact statement and overseas environmental impact statement between the Guam Historic Preservation Officer and the State Historic Preservation Officer. Who would oversee these documents?
I would have to look at it.
Okay, check and confirm, right?
Yes.
Okay, then moving on. For fiscal year 2020, did Parks and Recs receive any federal grants? And has Parks and Recs actively looked for federal grants? And I know that the oversight chair talked about the 5.6 million grant that was already provided to us, and that's in phase one and through the Department of Interior. But are there any other federal grants out there that Parks and Rec is actively seeking, maybe even to buy equipment and all that?
Well, we've been working with GURA also. So.
With GURA?
Yes.
Good. I ask this for all the agencies because we know that there's a lot of resources that have been coming into our island, and we want to make sure that if there is an agency that can ascertain themselves to getting federal resources, then we really should tap into that. The other big question that we've asked is no stranger to what's been happening recently. More important, it's asked almost on a yearly basis, is the homelessness in the parks is something that's always being brought up as they do the count every year. Has there been any attempts to provide maybe even any kind of stipend for these folks that are homeless so that in return they can take care of the grounds? Has there been any collaboration on something like that?
There's discussions about that ongoing as we speak.
So the discussion.
So there is things ongoing with the homeless down at the Paseo Park.
So is that being conversed with the administration, with GURA, with you?
With the administration, I was just asked about that, so I'm looking into it.
So this issue is being brought up with the administration, and you guys are working for a response as it relates to finding some amicable resolutions. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
And funding sources, because we know that there are resources out there that can be ascertained to this issue.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I also want to thank the oversight chair. She asked a lot of questions that I also had, and I'm looking forward for the informational briefing. We hope that somebody could be in place on a more permanent position. But as I look at the breakdown, and knowing that in personnel services alone, there's an impact of negative 310,000 that will not be afforded to Parks and Recs. And then as I look at the operations and utilities and the services that they have out there, I know that the overall increase for their budget, I think, was at 185,310 only. And I know, Mr. Chair, that the impact of this is very critical, because a lot of the funding sources that go to Parks and Recs is coming from funds that are gravely impacted today. So I'm hoping to continue to work closely with the Oversight Chair and you, Mr. Chair, so that we can look at other methods, inclusive of the federal grants that are out there, to help support the mandates of Department of Parks and Recs. And we shouldn't be afraid to ask, because with the impact, we've got to get creative and step outside the box and look for opportunities and maybe new industries to help this department out. So I want to say thank you, Jesse, for being here. But Mr. Chair, I'm literally concerned that the funding sources provided to Parks and Recs for 2021 is, wow, really
Low.
really critically low. And you know, in those efforts, we still need to provide for the recreational support for our community. We still have to provide the services that you guys do as it relates to burying our loved ones who've left that can't afford other services. The government has to step up, and those minimal fees that were assessed to those in the indigent community is not coming around anymore because of this pandemic, and I just know that this is really critical, and I want to see what I can do to assist. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to make those comments, ask those questions, and hopefully in the informational hearing coming up that we can get more answers to some of the inquiries that were presented to you, Mr. Jesse. Sinamasi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Vice, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Garcia, for stepping up to the plate for the Department of Parks and Recreation. Forgive me. Mr. Garcia, what other roles do you have within our government agencies now?
With the government agencies, the roles
Yes.
I have. Pretty much, I support all the government agencies through operations.
Say again, sir, I'm sorry.
All the government agencies, the line agencies, I give them support from Public Works, and so as my role with DPR, I give support with operations to get them going.
Okay. So I imagine your plate is very full.
Yes, it is.
So thank you for the amount of work that you have been doing within those agencies, and I know it's not easy. You know, before you came into DPR, we were having a lot of challenges with maintaining the pools and the parks, and I'm a little bit concerned with the budget request because we haven't received any significant revenue for the past 4 months, and a majority of the funding is recommended to be pulled out of the tourist attraction fund. So we have the director's office will be funded by TAF, the memorial services funded by TAF, community program funded by TAF, pool and beach funded by TAF, Paseo Stadium funded by TAF, Parks Admin and Planning funded by TAF, Maintenance funded by TAF, the Limited Gaming Fund, there was a ruling, an order that has been done. So I believe the only types of machines that may be in operation or have licensure to operate on Guam will be the horse racing machines. And so that's also going to have an impact. Territorial Park Patrol and Seashore Protection, funded by TAF, and the Historical Resources Division, funded by TAF. And so I'm just hoping that you can, if there's another recommendation other than using the special fund for TAF, where would be I guess a parallel funding source that we could use because of the impact of COVID to our tourist economy?
It's going to be rough with most of it coming from the TAF funding. Might want to look at having more private companies try to adopt a park or roadway.
Okay. There was also just recently in the news about a week or so ago, an article put out that the restrooms were not being maintained at our various sites like the Inarahan pools, in Tumon, they're shut down, and so people are defecating and using the restroom right outside or behind the restroom buildings. And was there any address or concern to the contract that is paid to maintain these restrooms?
So during the COVID, I don't believe that they were doing any maintenance of the restrooms during the COVID. Senator, the speaker brought up the thing about the stipend for the homeless, and we're looking at it and seeing if the homeless would be able to get a stipend and have them maintain the restrooms. So that way it would solve a couple issues.
Right, but that's why we invested thousands of dollars in Paseo Stadium so that the homeless could use those restrooms, and then we closed it off to them.
Yes, so they were looking at it to get the shower facilities and the restrooms ready for the homeless. But as of today, I just visited a couple places to see how can we solve some of these homeless issues down at Paseo.
Okay.
It's being worked on.
Okay, and so because the parks were shut down, and the contracts were already made out for the fiscal year 2020 for maintenance of the restrooms throughout the island, was there any prorated rate that the government received? Was there an adjustment to the contract, or the contractor was still getting paid and not having to perform those duties?
I'm pretty sure the contractor wasn't getting paid. I'll verify that. I've just been here about a week, so I'll follow up on.
Thank you, sir. And are the restrooms now open, and is the contractor performing the services in accordance with its contract?
Yes, the restrooms are open, and the contractor is being followed by our DPR staff to make sure that they follow the contract of the cleaning of the restrooms.
Okay, thank you, sir. And then the pools. So, we're still in PCOR 2, and so we still have some restrictions on gatherings. But we go out to the beaches and we see that our locals are utilizing the beaches and utilizing the parks. And so is there any anticipation to see our pools opening up anytime soon? So, or anything in the works to put our pools back into operation? We have the one in Agana and then the one in Dededo, is that correct?
Yes. Those are the two pools that we have. The Agania is being, the assessment is being made. It should be coming out shortly. We had engineers and pool, a pool expert or a guy that deals with pools come up and make the recommendations. So we're just waiting for that final report to come out so we can determine which way we're going to go.
Okay. I think from the, well, just from an observation within the past year with the whole situation of the Parks and Recreation former director and the pool contract was not really written well to accommodate the maintenance of the pools. Is there a possibility that, gosh, I know we're tight for money, but is there a possibility that we're looking at to perhaps gutting the whole Agania pool and maybe just relocating the pool or just gutting out the whole pipe system? Because I understand that a lot of the things that have been done towards the pool are just Band-Aid fixes, and so the upcoming contract or the RFQ or the RFP being issued for the maintenance of the pool, are we looking to really ensure that the pool is going to be working properly for years to come, or are we just putting a Band-Aid fix on it?
For the Agania pool, it doesn't look promising, but for the Territorial pool, we're going to try to get that up probably within 6 months, 4 to 6 months.
And then the lifeguards that were at these pools, are they government employees or they were contracted?
They were government employees.
Were they still getting paid during the time of the COVID?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So Joyce Masi for those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you.
Yes. And we still have 2 other senators or more, 3. I'll go ahead and move on to Senator Regine Bisco-Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Jesse, for again answering the call, for stepping up to lead this agency. I understand that you might not be able to fully answer some of these questions, but I'd just like to mention some of these issues and maybe ask you some of the questions just for the record, and then we can follow up
Yes.
at the informational briefing that will be held in the coming days, and then also give you a few weeks to respond to some of the rest of them. So we know that your budget request is $2.2 million. Thank you for the update on federal grant funding. You mentioned DOI, you mentioned working with GURA, et cetera. And I want to thank the Vice Speaker for detailing the challenge that we can foresee with a large portion of DPR budget really tied to the Tourist Attraction Fund. So if you can, in the next few days or weeks, just provide the committee with any suggestions that you might have for how we can augment this funding, how we can detail other sources for us to consider so that we can still meet the needs of the agency and meet the needs of our community. You mentioned, or actually in your budget, you have 4 funded but vacant labor positions listed under the Memorial Services Program. That's on page 20 to 23 of your budget. Do you plan on filling these positions, and when?
Yes, so I would like to get it funded to hire those additional 4 personnel for the cemetery.
So within the month, or what's your timeline?
All I know is that we have 2 positions that are being ready to hire. Those are the 2 for now, and I need to go back and look into it further.
Okay, if you could provide us with an update, that would be good. Mr. Garcia, you also mentioned earlier in a previous question about 7 lifeguards currently on staff. Is that correct?
Pardon?
7 lifeguards that are currently on staff?
Yes.
You mentioned 7, okay.
Yeah.
And then the Vice Speaker asked about lifeguards for the pool. I just wanted to clarify, the lifeguards that were working at the pool before, they are now being
They're, the
detailed
beaches,
to the
yes.
beaches?
Yes.
How many beaches do we have with lifeguards? Is it just Matapeng
It's
and
Matapeng
Ipaw?
and Matapeng and Ipoh.
So 7 in total for Matapeng and Ipaw, right? So I go to the parks and beaches often, and I understand some of the challenges due to the pandemic, but what was the reasoning behind closing some of these restrooms, especially when the lifeguards are on duty? So how are we expecting our lifeguards to use the restroom when they're on duty?
So during the pandemic, the parks were closed. So they were pretty much staying at home.
But even when the parks were opened back up, some of those restrooms still remain closed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I was looking into. So the restrooms are closed because if nobody's there to clean it, how would it be able to be open? But we reopened it, so we have the contracts ongoing.
Okay, I'm just very concerned that the government's still paying for these contracts and the work's not being done. So, and as was mentioned earlier, you know, there's evidence that people are relieving themselves right outside the bathroom doors, and we just cannot have that. So thank you in advance for trying to tackle that.
So with the contract they have, if they weren't cleaning, they're not going to get paid. Somebody has to sign off on that invoice, and if they weren't cleaning, they ain't going to get paid.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. One of the other concerns that I have is, you know, I take my kids to Ipal Beach, and one of the playgrounds at Ipal is extremely dangerous. There's no, like, you can walk up the stairs,
Yes.
and there's a platform there, and in between the platform and the slide, there's no place for kids to stand, so there's a 5-foot drop.
Yes,
you know, they can fall up. There's no caution tape. There's nothing to prevent children from being seriously injured in that area. And so I'm really concerned, like, if you have to put like a plywood or something to keep them out of there until it's fixed.
Yes, so right before the COVID, when I was the acting director, prior to this acting position, I did start taking those playground equipment out. I started off with the sail, if you notice, and then I started off taking it out at Ipal, but it wasn't completed because of the COVID. So I will follow up on that.
Please do. It's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yes.
So maybe I'll save this for the informational briefing, but I wanted to talk with you about training for the lifeguards. And then also, I had questions about the Paseo Stadium. I was there with my family last week, and you know, a lot of people use it for exercising, swimming, surfing. They walk around that area, and it just really needs some attention. So the maintenance of the recreation facilities has been projected at a 20% accomplishment for 2020 and 2021. Is there a reason why this figure is so low, only 20%?
I don't know, it's so low, but actually, since I've been at Parks and Rec this past week, we did a lot of cleanup in all the parks, Padre Palomo, Paseo, and we just finished the sports complex yesterday, and I'm moving around to manage our guys.
Thank you very much. And
We
we'll
also
be
did
following up
for the
with
pool
you.
game. Yes.
Okay, we'll be following up with you during the informational briefing that's upcoming. You answered some questions about the pool. So can I just ask you, what's the status of alternative facilities while the pool is down? So we know that Deredo is open, but when the public health emergency is lifted, or at the time when the pool is allowed to operate, where can stakeholders go, like our manamku, like disabled, like children with special needs, competitive swimmers? Where can they go in the meantime to have a pool that they can use? Like, Deredo is not an option for some people.
Well, with Deredo, way before the COVID, it really had issues with public health on getting it used, right? So we got to figure that portion out. Why was that issue happening with the water?
Mr. Garcia, this is something that I asked Director Ibanez and then Acting Director Birch. is there a way in the meantime, once pools are allowed to open, is there a way that we can work with some other facility like Leo Palace or the military base so that we can at least have some time during the week for, my concern is there are some federal funds that are tied to individuals with disabilities and they do their therapies in the pool. We have Manumku that uses the pool. We have, competitive swimmers that use the pool. And all of these people are being inconvenienced, not just because of COVID, but because they don't have a facility. Even once the public health emergency is lifted, how are we going to accommodate those people?
So prior to the COVID, I met with the Navy and a person from a private pool company. And, we're asking you, how would the public be able to use the military pools? Basically, the military would only allow for events like swimming meets.
Right.
But they can't be using it on a regular basis. They would be able to host the local.
Yeah,
for-
well,
for
maybe we
events.
can revisit that conversation and see if we can get them to allow us to use it on a regular basis until
and
a
then,
new.
And then also with Leo Palace, right? I guess the Swimming Federation made contact with them, and I guess it's just fees that they need to work out.
Right, and if there's fees, if there's a way that the government can compensate them and help to alleviate some of the burden and pay some of those fees while the pool's not up and running.
Well, that's what I'll be working on.
Great,
for the
okay,
next,
thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have a number of other questions, but I'll just send them directly to you. And then if there's anything additional, I'll send it to the chair
Yes.
as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Jim, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to picture you walking there, and the morale of the troops there at Department of Public Works. It's got to be hard. They lost Richard Ibanez, health reasons, and then John Birch abruptly leaves to go to a non-essential agency. But I think your expertise with DPW, we got the best. So thanks. But looking at that, what you're walking into is, and what has been mentioned is that agency is going to be broke, and your salaries are coming from funds that rely on tourists, and the other one on gaming. They don't exist, and I don't know how soon they'll get back. So I'm thinking if I was in your place, what would I do? Because the tourist attraction fund pays for the employees' salaries, basically, and then many of the employees have been transferred to Department of Public Works, which is a good thing because it's still helping the island and it's working with doing the projects as well for the parks. And maybe that's while you're there, when they find a permanent replacement for Parks and Works, maybe that's something we should look at for the existence of this department being funded by funds that aren't going to happen. What do we do? And so maybe now's the opportunity to look at it. Should Public Works run Department of Parks and Recs for meantime? And then put those resources together and then really focus on the 40-some parks that we have in some sort of priority. Like you were explaining, the equipment is Department of Public Works, and sure, we have some equipment for your Department of Parks and Recs folks, but with how many guys? Yeah, they all got bush cutters and mowers, but there's only so many people. Like you go up north, you cut the grass. When you go down south, you cut the grass, but before you even reach down south, the grass grew up north. So, and then we got another 30 days of the pandemic was extended. And that means we put off opening our flights coming back to Guam. That's the Tourist Attraction Fund. But when they do come back to Guam, we've had hearings before where, what do they want to do? They want to go to our parks. And when they're at the parks, we had people, the tour companies come in and say, please, can we use the bathroom? And I know Parks and Recs is working with that federal grant, almost $6 million. And I've seen some of the work. I went around Sunday, and I see there's work being done. I went into the Chinese park, right, as well, and they removed the grass growing from the roof, and they're repainting it, and but it's still locked. I went to Ipoh Beach, and the graffiti's still there, and the bathrooms are still locked. This is Sunday, and there's a lot of families out there too. I went to Fish Eye, and the bathrooms are still locked, and there's a lot of people out there as well. But Fish Eye has been closed for, I think the last memo I got when Ibanez was still there, it was supposed to be closed just for 6 months while they redo something with the sewer line. So that, it's just, I can imagine if I was an employee of Parks and Rec, it's like, yeah, that gotta be frustrating, Because I know they want to do their best, but we obviously aren't being able to fund them even before this COVID situation. And I think if we don't do something now with your expertise in there, because you get a better view coming from Department of Parks and Rec, we'll just end up be status quo. And talking about these bathroom situations, you can use it as a history book. But otherwise, I offered a couple of bills to public-private partnership with these parks, and that's something I can talk to you directly about, to offer some ideas to assist. And we had a public hearing, and it went pretty well as well. But doing the same old stuff, it ain't going to happen. And relying on these monies to get better, it's not going to happen. And I'm so happy we got the federal government to at least give us some information there too. So it's not really a question, but I just want to thank you for stepping up to the plate and adding to everything else that you do. And I want to thank the employees of the Department of Parks and Rec for a tireless job and a thankless job, and us not giving them the funding to perform their mission. But now at this situation, I think we've got to make some tough decisions. So I'm looking forward to the information briefing that we're having as well too. But
Yes.
yeah, so thank you, Jess, and
Okay.
thank you to the employees of the Department of Parks and Rec.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Jim. Senator Therese, you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garcia, Jesse, thank you for your work at DPR and DPW and all over, as you said, supporting all the agencies and all the miscellaneous projects that the government pulls itself into at the last minute. I know they always call you, for example, recently, the food distribution. I know that they called you again to assist with that, but I want to thank you very sincerely for your work. I know that when people put you on things, it's because they want something to get done, actually, to completion. So I'm very much hoping that while you're at Parks and Rec, you're able to assist them in that way, as you said, to fruition. If I could just ask a couple of questions. So for this budget, it's very similar to what was given last year. About $185,000 difference. Anyways, very similar, but did the board have any input into this budget?
I just stepped back into the directorship acting, and I haven't really met the board yet, it's just about a week now that I took over.
All right. I'm asking because the board at Parks and Rec is unique. They're the ones who hire the director as opposed to the legislature.
Yes.
So, and does DPR still have a deputy?
Yes, there's still a deputy at DPR.
And what about are there any lapses for FY20 that you're expecting?
No, I don't think we're going to have any lapses this year.
Okay. Prior year obligations or obligations that you're not able to pay that might carry forward?
Just a couple on the labor.
Labor?
Yes.
What do you mean, contracts?
Well, the compensation.
Oh, okay.
That are being asked.
Adjustments?
Yes.
That need to be paid, okay. You clarified earlier that memorial services are for the cemetery,
Yes,
right? And you're
yes.
trying to get more staffing, that's good. I noticed that so the SHPO, I looked at the staffing, and it looks like the TAF is funding both the State Historic Preservation Officer and the Guam Historic Preservation Officer. And so these two, there used to be just one position. The Guam Historic Preservation Officer was appointed by the governor to be the State Historic Preservation Officer for federal contract purposes or federal military project purposes. However, now that, there's two, there's a Guam and a State Historic Preservation Officer. They're both being funded from the TAF.
Yes.
It shows to me, not from federal funds.
Okay, but so with the position of the Miss Linda, she'll be retiring this Friday. Mm-hmm. So we'll look at our budget and if are we going to hire or just make it oversee both.
Okay, and was there when the current State Historic Preservation Officer, Patrick Lujan was transferred to Parks and Rec, he was transferred from the Department of Public Health, is my understanding. Did the funding come with him?
I'm not too sure if it was transferred with the budget or just the personnel.
All right, so, and he was so, is that position now described
I believe
as,
Patrick held that position prior to going to public health.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming that he was brought back.
okay, that's not my understanding. Okay.
Well, I gotta look into it.
All right, yeah, I'm curious about the funding from public health, if that was transferred over or not, and whether this position is permanent now, or if he's acting in that capacity. There was obviously, it feels a little bit frustrating and circular that we're discussing this budget and how we're going to change, the parks and the pools and the historic preservation offices for 2021 when the entire funding for all of this is coming from TAF. And, projections for TAF are not looking good for 2020 or 21. And, but have you made any adjustments to the DPR budget or operations or expenditures for 2020?
Senator, I think when we do the informational briefing, I can get all this information.
Wait, I'm sorry, there's a motorcycle or something. I can't hear you. Or could you just talk very loud? Yeah.
Okay, so basically, when we do this informational briefing, I would gather all the information
okay.
that we're being asked.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, and so there was a lot of talk about the money for the pools, the parks maintenance, the restrooms especially. But I want to know, we're using $5.6 million in grant money to make repairs on these bathrooms. But as we've seen in the past, repairs can easily be undone or by a typhoon, by damage just from, people in the community who aren't appreciating those things. So repairs are one thing, but, and there's you have a list of parks that are being covered under that repairs
Yes,
grant,
the
correct?
Repair grant, yes.
Yeah. But GVB was taking care of the maintenance contracts for at least 5 parks.
Yes,
And I think you said earlier
They're
they're doing the south? Is that
Yes.
how you described it?
yes.
Yeah.
yes.
But, going forward, I don't know. They're willing to, I thought that their maintenance were doing an okay job. When we went to Inarajan before the shutdown, people would say the Inarajan bathrooms were very clean and usable. And, of course, they still had challenges from people who come in and destroy it. But I know for a fact my issues with the Matapang and Ipao, they seem, sometimes they're clean, sometimes they're not, sometimes, it's repaired, sometimes it's not. And then those parks that GBB was not covering, it's just inconsistent. So I heard you earlier say you're going around, you're making repairs to leaking, faucets,
Yes.
all of that stuff. We see that all the time, right? But could you just talk about Matapang for a little while?
Okay.
So Matapang Beach has looked the same for so long. It still has flooding in the parking lot, and it looks so unsanitary, honestly. That parking lot flooding, some people say it's because the ponding basin was covered, right?
Yeah. So actually, with Matapang itself, right, you have the hotel that's next to it. When they originally built the hotel, I think there was an agreement where they maintained the parking lot and the beach itself. So I have my guys looking into what the original stipulation from land management when they got the
Thank
condition to
you.
build the hotel.
That's what I thought.
So we
but
need to go back
I've
and-
raised this with other people, and they don't seem to know about it. So you're the first one, thank you, who has gone back to, you're talking about the conditional use variance or
Yes,
something,
yes,
some
yes.
variance that the hotel got,
'Cause
and that was
believe-
supposed to be their obligation.
Yeah,
you're
and I
thinking.
believe when they gave the condition, there was some issues with parking, and that was
Yes.
part of the
Right, there-
agreement that they upkeep. So I gotta pull that document out. Actually, I have somebody
wish
checking
you the
into
best
it.
success with that. Thank you. That would be huge because it's one of the more used beaches because of the paddling and just it's always crowded there. And I think we need to make it sanitary. So I was just there recently also, and the faucets are working, but the rest of the bathrooms are taped off. But I was surprised to see even the faucets were on, so that's great. And I saw faucets on at Talafofo, other places too, so I can see, I hope you can get all these bathrooms back on. Shut down or not, these beaches are crowded, and it just seems completely unsanitary, and another health risk that we are putting on ourselves to allow them to operate without the bathrooms being open and clean. But I was going to ask you, what can we expect for 21? We'll get some repairs, right, from this grant money. And if TAF funds come in, I guess we're going to get some maintenance. But do you think it will be status quo at the end of 21?
It might be status quo, but rest assured, since I've been assigned to DPR and I'm still with DPW, it becomes closer to me, so I'll make sure that whatever happens to DPR, I would take into consideration to see what I can do to help it move along.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your big picture look at the whole island and maintaining it to be very useful. So I wish you the best. Yeah, I guess I'll also ask my additional questions if we have another hearing. But
Yes.
yeah, it's looking grim, I guess, right? Look
It's gonna
how
be rough.
important this.
Yes.
Look, the important work of the Parks and Rec, the importance to our health and our safety, and it's really at risk with the decrease in the TAF funding. We're just going to have to start working on rearranging funding, maybe, right, and make sure that this agency just doesn't get just cut out of the picture. I
It's
think
going to be rough, but
I think it's very needed.
we'll see what we can do to help it out.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senators. Senator Kelly, do you have as the oversight, you said you had one follow-up?
Trying to box me into just one question. Yeah, I had skipped over one, and so I really appreciate the questions by my colleagues because this is a department that's really important to the community. We really need to be making sure that it's taken seriously, that it's doing its analysis of its needs, it's passing on those needs to us, and that we're able to look for those funding sources, and we're definitely going to be challenged because, as has been pointed out, a lot of it is coming from TAF. So finding those alternate funding sources is going to be real important. And that leads into this question. So I've heard that the U.S. Department of Interior, through its State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Program, has $1.6 million for parks, repair, renovation, or augmentation of Guam's recreational facilities. So I throw out some of what's been discussed, maybe updating our playgrounds, maybe having some of it go to the pool, maybe more repair needs to go on. And so again, I know you've only been back a week, Mr. Garcia or Acting Director Garcia. Have you heard or had any discussions about this additional $1.6 million? And is there any direction that we can be looking forward to and supporting its use for our community in the parks?
I believe that's what's ongoing right now with the repairs of the restrooms, the facilities, and then also.
Well, and hopefully this is good news then, because I believe the repairs for the facilities is the former $5.6 million, but I believe this is an additional or other $1.6 million. So if you haven't had discussions about that yet, if you could please look into that so that when we have our informational briefing, we'll be able to hear more, because any federal dollars coming in, $1.6 million, sounds like it could do a lot of good for our community and the state of the parks right now. So that is my one question. I do want to encourage you also to just do what you can to look at the CARES Act money that's coming in. We are dealing with certain things that are COVID related. And I know that there was money that was set aside for a safe haven. That was when it was going to be at Paseo, but safe haven is really coming out of Homeland Security and the Homeless Task Force. And so other than that, I don't really think that there's money coming to DPR through the CARES Act, but if you could please look at that more carefully, whether it's cleaning supplies, PPEs for your lifeguards that are out there at the front lines, whatever it needs to be, whether it's related to the cemeteries and waiving the fees to be able to accommodate our community at this time of need. I don't know offhand what all the guidelines could be, but since there is that $117 million, and we know that there are these additional needs, especially for healthy parks and healthy play areas and healthy other things, if we could really look at that to see if any of that could be used to supplement what's needed to take care of our community at this time. So I will stick to my word to the community chair and just call that one question, and I will defer back to him, Sidus Maasi.
Thank you. And Jess, even though you're just the acting today, and hopefully they'll get something tomorrow, and if you do return as the acting, just to let you know that you're one of the very few agencies in the Gulf of Guam that's fully funded by special funds. So
yeah.
That's something that I know my office is looking at very carefully, and you do, the agency does play a major role. From cemeteries to the beaches to the parks to, God, just about every part of on the island. And with that, I thank my colleagues for their questions that they've asked, and that the committee will conclude this budget hearing with the Department of Parks and Rec. And like the oversight mentioned, you do have a information hearing that'll be coming up soon. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing, submitted via email to Senator Joe S. Agustin at gmail.com. Sidus Maasi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 282-35 LS relative to the Department of Parks and Recreation is now adjourned at 2:26. Have a nice afternoon, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock for Guam Regional Transit Authority. Thank you.